well. So based on what you are seeing on the ground for those markets, which markets in the rest of the world shows the strong demand and the growth post RIA?
I think it's not really that different than pre-RIA. The rest of the world, in our experience anyway, has been led by Taiwan, Korea, and to some extent by Vietnam. I think Vietnam's experiencing some internal challenges, and I think with the program, it's kind of in that midpoint in terms of orientating itself with EB5. But certainly in the past, at least the past 2 years or so, we've definitely seen a strong demand from Taiwan, South Korea. There's interest in Vietnam, not as many filings. So maybe some of this data goes back earlier. Certainly we've seen increased interest from Latin America, especially from Brazil and Colombia. So that's certainly where we've seen things.
How about you, Brandon? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I would concur with that, and I would say that the filing data from Vietnam is artificially low. What I mean by that is the demand drivers in that market are still extremely high. But what's keeping the numbers below historical rates, and several factors. Christine alluded to internal challenges. So there's been economic difficulties over the past couple of years that have made it difficult for investors to have sufficient liquidity to move forward. Also, as well, I call it toxic waste cleanup. There's a lot of cases from the 2017 through 19 era that are on the glide path to denial, either for bad source of funds, bad path of funds, some combination of the two. And those cases are currently playing themselves out. USCIS is working very diligently to try to clear out those cases as rapidly as possible. But the simple reality is that in that particular market, the only CBI program, citizenship by investment, or program that really fulfills the needs of people from Vietnam is EB5. There's no Australia program right now. There's no Canada program. Spain, there's no Spain program. Yeah, sure. There's Portugal. There's Malta. There's various islands in the Caribbean. But realistically, they don't provide any tangible medium to long-term benefit for that market. And so again, all roads lead back to EB5. But once we kind of clear up the mess from the old days, then I think that market can start to move forward, and we'll start seeing more representative numbers in the coming years.
No, this sounds great. So it sounds like we have a strong growth in Taiwan. Now is the third largest market, overtaking Vietnam. But it sounds like the slowdown in Vietnam could be temporary, right? Because people are still wait and see. So it's important to continue our engagement with those markets. But also, I'm looking at this rest of the world numbers. The demand is very strong. The filings accounts for close to 30% of the worldwide filings from the rest of the world. So Suzanne, I know you crunch a lot of data about visa demands and supplies. So with such a strong demand from the rest of the world, should the investors from Taiwan, Vietnam, or the rest of the world outside of China be worried about the per country cap?
Yeah, that is a very important question, because the per country cap can theoretically limit nationals from any one country to 7% of available visas, and 7% once you get into the EB5 categories is really small. So it's a question, who has to worry about that? And first of all, by country, who has to worry about that? Department of State has made very clear that they only do the 7% per country prorating on countries that have demand for more than 7% across employment-based and family-based visas, not specifically within a certain category. And the countries that 7% across the board apply to, every year since 2005, basically, it's been the same 4 countries: China, India, Mexico, and the Philippines. And because of that, on this FOIA request, IIUSA did get the numbers for Mexico and the Philippines for EB5. However, they didn't put them on the slide because even though overall Mexico and Philippines are high, in EB5 they're not that high. So they're under 7% in any case. They don't need to worry about that. China and India are the two countries that are consistently have the country cap potentially applied because of their high demand across the board. Plus in EB5, they have high demand. So that's an issue. But even for China and India, do I actually get limited to only 7%? That depends on if other people are using the rest of the 86%. Because if other countries aren't using the EB5 visas, then they get left on the table. Department of State is going to issue them to China and India even above the 7%. And so that's why this rest of the world column is so interesting and important to if you're from China and India, because you want to see how many people are here and how many visas are they going to be leaving on the table for me, potentially above my tiny little 7% limit. And I would say in the high unemployment rest of the world, this is a concerning category. This is a big number. This number is not going to leave many on the table. And so that's why when people look at this, they realize either China and India are not in a good spot with their country cap, or maybe if we could talk some of these rest of the world people into taking an unreserved visa instead of a high unemployment visa, that might lighten things up. One other thing on the rest of the world is that a large number of unreserved rest of the world is mostly from fiscal 2022 before the regional center program started. So those were old 500,000 investors.
I'm so glad you touched base on this one too. So we also see the most of the unreserved under India before the RRA as well. So we should not be distracted by the 281 unreserved or unknown under the India column. So it sounds like for the rest of the world, the 7% per country gap may not be as worrisome to those investors as they are to investors from China and India. So it sounds like even though the demand is very high from Taiwan, Vietnam, Korea, they should not need to worry about the per country cap. Is that a fair assessment?
They should not worry about the per country cap. The only thing that you can keep an eye on is if the possibility of retrogression, if the total number of rest of the world demand is greater than the total number of visas available to rest of the world. And this is not quite there yet, but these numbers are so small, especially in high unemployment, that once we get down to there's only 10,000 high unemployment visas available, we can't afford to be having 1,000.
You mean 1,000?
Yeah,
I wish that 10,000.
I wish it were 10,000.
That would be dream come true.
When we're through carryovers and there's only 1,000 high unemployment visas, 1,000 rest of the world investors are not going to all fit in to get visas in a year. So I think it's important when we're talking about market size to look at this. Is wonderful to think about what's the market in terms of where are people interested in EB5 visas, where's demand coming from. This is wonderful for the economy. On the other side, also think of market size in terms of how many visas are available. How many incentives do we have available to sell? And that number is defined by the annual visa availability, which is different from what we're looking at here.